Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today is a very special day. I am here in Milan at Central Station. Today is a really special video. Today is the start of my Churchill Fellowship Research Grant, and you guys are coming along on this journey with me. I'll be traveling to Milan, Barcelona, China and Singapore to study how we can make our towns and cities a little bit greener, and also the positives and negatives of ecotourism. Last year I began the application process for the Churchill Fellowship. I created a thesis which was how to make our towns and cities greener and the positives and negatives of ecotourism, and I selected some countries that I wanted to visit, and I had to go through a whole application process. I then travelled down to London for interviews, and I was successful, and I've been awarded a grant, which is a sum of money which is going to allow me to go out and travel. And I have to stick to my budget, obviously, which is in itself a challenge. But this grant will be used to help me on this expedition to find as many positive green solutions, nature-based solutions to help make our towns and cities greener across the UK. In order to fully complete the Churchill Fellowship, once I am back, I am due to write a report on my findings. However, instead of writing a 10,000 word report, what I'm choosing to do is to document my journey through film. I'm creating this series and sharing it online so that you guys can see some of my findings. So you'll find that the videos are in essence structured almost like a written report, but it's just in video form. Anyway, let's just get started with the video. For the next 10 days, I'm going to be living here in Porta Romana. Porta Romana is in the southeast of Milan, and it is such a charming little area. It's not a tourist trap. There are lots of local residents to the city. It's really leafy and green, but also full of bars, restaurants, shops. So much so that you don't even need to leave the area to get the bits and pieces that you need. And the other part that makes it so great is excellent transportation system. You can get from Porta Romana to the central district in 15 minutes, which will take you right here. Now, just like any major city, Milan suffers from overpopulation and heavy traffic. Let me tell you, the Milanese roads, they are not for the weak. So much so that the Milanese local government has recently put in place a congestion charge. Now, we're going to talk about this in more detail in the next video. However, if we are trying to get commuters off the streets from cars, then you need to have a public transport to back it up. Here is Milan Central Station, and you can pretty much get anywhere from the station. So when you come in from the airport, it will take you to here. You can get an express train. But just look at the absolute grandeur of this. In order to have greener and more sustainable cities, we need to make sure that actually we have great public transport. And that's one of the reasons why throughout this whole series, not only will I be taking us to some green spaces or green buildings, I'm also going to be analysing public transport that's available, because if we want people to ditch their cars, then they need to be able to get to work. So public transport is key, and Milan, let me tell you, you can get anywhere and anywhere quickly. Okay, so right now I am on the main concourse here at the station. Now you can get overground trains, they can go all over Italy, but there's also a metro station underneath, so that is quite similar to the New York subway or the London Underground. And there are also trams and buses and taxis from this very station. So literally any way you want to get across this city, you can. If you see an M sign like this, it will mean that it's actually a metro station. So that's the underground. There, I think, bear with me, I've only been here for 2 days so far. So I think there are around about 4 underground lines. And then you've got a really great bus network which mirrors the underground but has more bus stops. And then you also have trams, which we are coming up to. We've got tram lines over here, and there are around about 29 different tram services. So you can get anywhere across the city with this kind of public transport. So you can see the network of suspended cables, which are actually not just for trams, they're also for buses as well, believe it or not. So here you'll see an example. So this is one of the buses. Now this follows the green metro line, and this bus goes above ground. It is 100% zero emissions, and it connects itself up to the power line at the top there, and the middle of the street is dedicated to taxis and buses. So in essence it's a glorified taxi and bus lane, and it then circumvents all of the traffic across the city. So the buses always run to time, or supposedly should run to time. Now in terms of public transport, what you can do is you can use contactless on each journey. I think it's around about £2.20 or something like that. Sorry, €2.20 for each journey. Or you can buy a 90-minute pass, or you can buy a 24-hour pass or a 3-day pass, and you can either buy a ticket from one of the stations, or you can just download an app, and then you'll have a QR code that you scan every time that you get on one of the vehicles. So again, there's lots of cost cutting and money saving tips. And these passes are travel cards, so they allow you to use the full spectrum of the transport here in Milan. So you don't just have to stick to the underground. You can use the underground, you can use the buses, you can use the trams, you can use the whole entire transport network. So again, in terms of efficiency, some of the stock, the trams for example, may be on the older scale of things. However, it doesn't matter because you're getting around. Okay, so to get through the gates, if you have the app, you need to get your QR code, then you take it to a machine, scan, maybe, boom, and then you're through. Currently I'm here and I'm going to Port Romana, and all of the main touristy stuff is around here. So because I'm on the tube line, sorry, the metro line that goes straight to there, it's so simple. It's like 4 stops. There are 5 underground lines in total in Milan, and the service actually began operation on the 1st of November in 1964. It has a daily ridership of 1.4 million journeys every day. Think about Milan and all the touristy places, it's around about there. But to put it into perspective, that is how big Milan actually is. So my travel pass takes me to MI1, 2 and 3, but you can go all the way out to 9. In addition to the trams and buses and metro, there's also an extensive overground service. So I thought I would take a little trip and see how this works too. Okay, this is not normal in the UK. I'm on a double-decker train. And the suburban lines, when they reach the city centre, they also come underground as well. So that almost doubles the capacity of the underground network. So those of you who live in London or have visited London, the brand new Thameslink train line that goes from London Bridge through Farringdon underground, it's pretty much the same thing. It'll come into one of these underground stations and then you just get out. But you can use your QR code or zones 1 to 3 QR codes on these trains if you are traveling within the 3 zones. It's so cool, so handy. Right now, I'm on my way to Orto Botanico de Barrera, and my goal is to find out a little bit more about why people use their balconies and small spaces to grow here in Milan. Hidden right in the city centre is this beautiful botanical garden, and what makes this even more special is that it's free. It was first established in 1774 and consisted of plants for medicine and pharmaceutical needs. Currently, the garden is managed by the University of Milan. The university's goal is to show how plants can play a central role in society and also local ecosystems. There's a real desire to show and teach visitors the importance of plant science. What's amazing to me is that I came along in September and yet the garden looks so lush. The garden has an incredibly rich history. During the French period, the botanical garden increasingly became a place of meetings and leisure and was enriched with exotic and ornamental plants. But with the fall of Napoleon first and the unification of Italy later, the botanical garden fell increasingly into abandonment. It was slowly recovered and then brought back to its ancient splendor and reopened to the public. Now, the university showcases the medicinal use of plants but also challenges sustainability and climate change. Whilst I was here, I took the opportunity to speak to some members of the team to really try and isolate why people use their balconies in the way that they do. In fact, it was here that I learned just how difficult gardeners in Milan have found it to maintain their gardens. The increased change in climate has made things very, very difficult. In fact, one worker told me that it's rare for temperatures to drop below zero, even in winter. And yet, summers keep getting hotter and hotter. I also learned that many first-time balcony gardeners want to try and grow something really colourful. However, that's not what works best. And so they advise them to grow drought-tolerant plants. If you're coming to Milan, this botanical garden has to be on your list. After visiting the botanical gardens, there was a lot of food for thought in my mind, and I looked at all of the balconies in a completely different way. Now, this is your typical Milanese street. It's all apartments. And so what I learned at the botanical garden is, as much as we think in the UK that Milan is green, the reality is that the vast amount of the residents here live in these tiny apartments, some of which don't even have washing machines. So you'll find there'll be laundrettes on some of the high streets. And because they don't have access to a green space like a garden, for example, they opt to use their balconies as gardens. But also, because the balconies are facing directly opposite, the garden becomes a privacy screen to create that little bit of privacy. So you may live in tower blocks like this, and as you can see, people really have gone to town with some of their balconies. But in terms of green space, this would be considered your communal green space, and yes, it's lovely, beautifully landscaped. Just look at this. But the reality is that this is not where you would come out and relax. Although I can't lie, it is really beautiful. This would cheer me up if I had to walk through here to get home. Combined with my learnings from the botanical garden and my walks throughout the city, I was able to establish that people didn't have front and back gardens. So I spent some time walking through the suburbs. I discovered that most buildings had some form of a courtyard, some small and some large. I've just taken a little bit of refuge from the midday heat, and I kind of just barged into this estate, but it's really cool. Look at how many of these apartments are growing. It's absolutely insane as far as I can see. And this one in between their courtyard is really lovely. Like, you've got these, obviously the concrete paths, and then you've got the lawns and benches, so you can actually come and just sit out here. So if you really did need a little bit of an escape from the apartment, at least you could come and sit out here. So I know that if I was flat hunting, this would probably be on my list of places because of this little bit of outside space. So if you look, actually, the planters are built into every single one of these balconies. And yet the ones without are the ones that have got the most balcony gardeners. It's always the way. Still beautiful though. The balcony gardens weren't created by the building managers or the developers. It was in actual fact the residents, and they were doing it out of love for gardening, out of the want and desire to reconnect to nature. It made me think about the alleyway garden that I helped with, and the fact that people just wanted to connect to nature in the city. Through word of mouth, I came across a community gardening group in North Milan. I decided to take a little trip. I felt like I was getting closer and closer to understanding green spaces in Milan, but I was missing a human element. Not everybody in Milan is content with balcony gardening, some people have got a really huge desire to reconnect to nature. I'm here in an old abandoned mental health hospital. There's a community group here who have taken their passion for connecting to nature to the next level. I cannot wait for you to see this. 10 years ago, a group of out-of-work ladies took over a small patch in this mental health hospital. What started off as a small patch has grown into acres and acres of land that they have rehabilitated and turned into a community gardening space. Here I met the group leader, Laura, and she showed me around the space.
You see?
Oh yeah.
This is the man.
So right now we're in one of the paddocks, which they call here a horty, and we've been able to come up with a rough translation. I believe it to be an allotment space, and it's a community allotment space. Obviously we are in September, so everything is not looking the best, but just look at how productive this area is. Laura explained that the garden has gone through many different transformations. It's now an allotment space. People come and they have their own individual areas which they cultivate themselves. There are about 5 main volunteers who maintain the garden, and she's also invited refugees who will come and help to cultivate the land. And she also spoke about how they would share techniques to grow. In a time where migration was a divisive issue, the garden helped to bring them together. Absolutely nothing gets wasted, everything gets shared between the community. I particularly love the dead hedge. So that's how they've managed to fence off these different little paddocks, is just chopping down some of the trees. And the team were explaining that actually what they do is they will take down some of the branches to make a little bit more light, or leave some shade patches in some of these paddocks, and then the leftover wood will then be used to create structures all throughout the garden. So it's super sustainable. Plus it also stops the chickens from getting through and eating the seeds. And that's just one paddock. Let's go to the next one. Compost piles. So again, these fences are made out of pallets and bits of wood and branches, and then they even use them to make trellises. So if you look at the tomatoes here, they're trained right the way up on these old branches and bamboo. The community also shared just how difficult it is growing. The weather and climate is completely unpredictable. They didn't have a lot of sun, so the tomatoes haven't ripened, and yet they can grow these huge, giant banana trees, which 10 years ago wouldn't have been able to grow here. And we've even got this CD here to keep the pigeons away. They've already started their winter sowing, and you can see the brassicas are beginning to look pretty healthy. It's just never ending. There's so much. Now you guys, tell me if this sounds familiar. It started off with a small patch, and then suddenly it grew and it's become a struggle to manage. Now, how many of us have been in the same situation? But to be honest, just remember that we are in September, so the season is kind of almost over. So the fact that they've still got so much going on is a real testament to the volunteers here. This is so inspiring. This is by far the most wildlife that I've seen in any of the green spaces that I've been to. There are lizards, there are crickets, slugs, snails, wasps, bees, everything, all kinds of pollinators. I haven't seen them in this kind of number at any spot that I've been to in the city. I am certain that every community garden has a real character, and I met one of them here. This is Leopoldo.
The figures look incredible, eh?
He took time out of his day to show me around his patch of the community garden. You won't be finding any perfect lines here in his garden. It is what it is. If it grows, it grows.
One, no, oh, come.
But they're so high.
So high, really. I never saw.
And this is the white cherry. Throughout my flower show series, there were a couple of gardens that had adopted different kinds of lawns, and there was one garden that had a clover lawn, and here we can see it in practice. And the idea is that they've been using this as a cover crop to try and suppress weeds. And if you look, these guys are super healthy.
This one, look. Old variety. I discovered it 4 years ago. Tillywood.
Is it
much
the taste?
more tasty than the usual squash, you know, but it's fantastic.
I would absolutely love to take Uncle Monty Don here to this garden just to see his face. A pumpkin growing up a tree.
Chioggia is around Venezia. This is one of the best pumpkins.
Wow.
Here because it was a fig, make
So-
shadow.
Oh, so because of the fig shadow, and then these tomatoes have just grown themselves.
They stole me all the apple, all varieties.
An apple
I
tree.
discovered more than 200 apple varieties. When I start to make it, to research all varieties, you know, I don't like the apple. My friend, I discovered something fantastic. And this was very old. It was cultivated in the border between Switzerland and French around 1500.
Wow.
It's called Pigeonnet Blanc d'Hiver.
I've only shown you half of what's here. There's even a fruit orchard. Wow. Well, of course, you know, these guys wouldn't be gardeners if they weren't handing out some of their fresh produce. I'm gonna have to snack on this on the tube home, or see if I can smuggle some of this back to the UK. A massive thank you to Laura and Leo Paolo and the whole entire community for being so welcoming and bringing me into their space. I have left this garden feeling so inspired. It's really made me think more about how do we get more spaces like this into the city so that people don't feel pushed out. There's so much to digest here. If you wanted to come and visit this place when you come to Milan, there's actually a hostel on site. So what I'll do is I'll leave a link below in the description box so that you can book your spot and come and meet the team here as well. Despite all of that, that doesn't mean that there is no green space in Milan whatsoever. In fact, right now I am standing in one of Milan's biggest parks. And in order to get into the park, let's just say the entrance is very grand. Welcome to Castello Sforzesco. It's a medieval fortification located in Milan city centre. It was built in the 15th century, but by the 17th century it was one of the largest citadels in Europe. Inside, right now, you'll find plenty of exhibitions and museums. Each side of the fortress measures 200 meters and each of its corners is topped by beautiful towers. The two towers on the main facade are sturdy circular towers whose purpose was to reinforce the walls. Over centuries, the castle became more and more pimped up. I mean, just look at it. It's reported that some centuries ago, the then Duke of Milan decided that he wanted the castle to look more than pure and simple. He wanted it to have a more elegant appearance. So they had to get to work. This map shows just how vast this citadel would have been. The city of Milan was completely enclosed. But yet, despite that, there still are some green patches within the castle. The red brick is so striking. But as you walk through the castle, it will take you through to the other side. Right behind the castle is Parco Sempione. It was built between 1888 and 1894, but its history does stretch back even beyond there. The park was designed to create avenues for carriages to make sure there was a pond. But interestingly, the greenery was designed according to the romantic model of the English park. There are a number of parks like this scattered throughout the city, some larger than others. Tourists and local residents alike meet up and enjoy this space. And if you head right down to the end of the park, you'll come across the Arc de Peace. I was truly in awe at the size and the grandeur of this building. It was commissioned by Napoleon to represent his victories, but after his defeat at Waterloo, it became a symbol of peace. I cannot even begin to tell you the scale of that. It is huge. Like, it is 2024 and I'm looking at that and I'm freaking impressed. But imagine what you would have felt if you were alive at the time it was just been built. Like, that is insane. It's great to know that urban planning a few centuries ago really focused on creating green spaces. So I wanted to know what the current plan was, and I came across this park. I'm here at Parco 8 Marzo, which is Milan's very first park in a long time. In fact, this park opened last year in March. Now, it's not looking the best, I will give it that. However, I have arrived here at the very end of summer, and so the park is looking a little bit worse for wear. This park is designed to help with the regeneration of the Port Vittoria area. The park has around about 400 trees with 35 different species, and it's not your standard traditional park. In fact, the developer, Prelios, has put a lot of thought into the design of this park. You'll find that there are lots of different levels, different heights, not just in terms of the planting, but in terms of the actual soil and the structure of the park. In fact, I'm standing on a giant hill within this park and I've got such an amazing view of the space. However, it's not just for show. This hill is designed to collect the rainwater and allow it to seep down into the park. There are also these hedges that line the park that allow the visitors to the park to feel like they are protected from the hustle and bustle of the city centre. What's really, really interesting about this park is it's not just all concrete. Developers in the UK have got a tendency when they create a green space to concrete everything over. This is designed to be the complete opposite to that. This is about bringing nature into the city. So not only are there hills, not only are there these dunes, are there these floral beds that act as barriers in between the planting, in between each section of the park. There are also wide open plains so that people can sit and enjoy the sun. When it comes to developers in the UK, they are so lazy. Probably be the pinnacle of what they would create, this space here, concreted over. But in this park, it's more like a set of different gardens within a garden. One of the themes is that each one of these paths are permeable, so when it rains the water seeps down into the water table, which causes less flooding and allows the water to really get down and disappear. But also the paths are different colours, but the park is designed so that you don't even have to follow the path. It gives you, as the guest to the park, the ability to change, to either walk through the lawns or go over the hills and traverse different types of terrain within the park. Each one of the flower beds are completely different, so you might find some hibiscus over there and some salvias, but then over here it's completely different. Then when we get over into this section, it's completely different again. And what's really interesting to me between the park is you can see that the laid back, the open section of the park is kind of dried and crisped out because of the baking heat. But actually, if we go and look over here, we can see we've got all of these trees lining this whole section of the park. There are some children playing over here, so I'm really conscious of not getting any of the children on camera. But you can see how densely it's planted in here. And if we just go around this side, just look at these grasses. Phenomenal. What beautiful colours. And so we've got the paving stones, and as you can see, it's just this green oasis. We'll get round there in a bit, but there's a 32-meter long table which really allows for people to use the space as a communal area. We then have these corten steel structures, and then the planting is mirroring some of that colouring. Strangely enough, we have these rows of hedging, and at first glance you might think why, and it's been planted in these straight lines. So as you can see, it's row by row by row, and you might think, well, why is that? Well, actually this is planted like this to reflect the railway station which was once here, and which this park is now connecting to further down onto that side. So the entrance to the train station is now down that end, but here we've got an ode to the railway lines. I would surmise that because this section is planted so densely, it's actually allowed the plants to retain moisture in the soil. So as you can see, barely anything is fading away. Everything is doing so well. Just for some perspective, they're almost as tall as me. You see, now as a guest you have to make a choice. Which path do you take? And just like a train track, the paths zigzag and cross over, and as you can see, the paths are two different colours. Interestingly, these are plants that do just fine in the UK. There's nothing crazy about the planting here. The grasses are designed to be plumes of smoke. You have some really nice secluded seating areas, and then you can choose to go off the beaten track down this path, and as you can see, it's not beautifully manicured at all, but it kind of adds to the charm. You see, I'm actually glad I did come at this time of year, because the grasses wouldn't have been in flower earlier on in the season. The park is designed to help guests disconnect from being in the city, which is pretty difficult because there are all of these towers around. However, by including all of these different paths, the different heights, it kind of allows you to forget for a little bit that you are in the city. But just to really hammer home that point of breaking away from the office, they've gone one step further. You see, this just looks like a seating area, but if you look closely, there's this letter B, and let's see. You start to notice that actually the designers have created this keyboard seating area, which I think is a really nice touch. You can see the road is just over there, and then this hedging acts like a barrier to protect you from the street. It also helps to collect the exhaust emissions from the cars and allows the air quality to be better in this side of the park. From what I can see, a lot of the new houses that are being built here in Milan, they all have balconies. Now in the UK, in China, in the US, a lot of these new buildings that are going up are all glass and don't give people access to outside space. So the fact that Milan is with its roots by making sure that even these newer buildings have got the outside areas, just like these old ones, is really, really important. I mean, this one looks to be brand spanking new, and as you can see, even more effort and thought has gone into making sure that people can access the outside from their apartments. I have to say, it's really, really refreshing to come here and to see a green space that has been designed for the people. I find that the green spaces that are created in these developments back in Manchester where I live, the green space seems to be an afterthought. It's concreted over, and the reason being is it's down to maintenance. You don't want to spend too much money maintaining it, but you got to pretend to give people the green space. Whereas here, the park is not perfect. Look, it's not exactly green. Again, it's down to heat and temperature, but the park is pretty much left to its own devices and it's doing really, really well. The reason being is they thought about the permeable paths, they thought about the planting density over there, having those raised hills and the raised areas to really allow the water, when it does rain, to sink into the water table, means the majority of the planting here survives. So if Milan can do it, why can we not do this in the UK? In the next episode, I'm going to be finding out a little bit more about the city's 2030 plan. I'm going to be heading to some of the city's newest green projects. If you haven't already, don't forget to like the channel and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you all again next time. Bye!